hopefully we'll be able to share your screen again and we can get going.
Thank you, Faye. Bear with me, everybody. I've got a presentation that I will just put up onto the screen. Oh, right. Faye, would you mind just give me a thumbs up that you can see that? Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Faye.
Yeah,
I'm going to make presumptions that everybody can hear me okay, and what I'm saying matches what you can see on the screen, unless I hear otherwise. Thank you for the introduction, Faye. I will introduce myself fairly briefly, but I'll tell you a little bit about my background, my job, but also what kind of led me into a career as a teacher, if you like. My name is Tom Holder. I am a qualified teacher. My background is in primary. So I've been a primary school teacher for about 18 years. I'm a former King Edge student. I did my A-levels at King Edge. So I won't say other than it was last century. So it was a while ago. But I'll let you know kind of my sort of experience, if you like. I had a really good A-level experience and university experience. But when I was sort of 16, 17, 18, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. It seemed to me that a lot of my friends did. Certainly when they made university applications and things like that, they seemed to have a really kind of clear career path in mind, and I didn't. And I had a kind of a gap year after A-levels where I worked. I then went to university. I chose to do a subject that I enjoyed. So I did a degree in history, but not really sure what I wanted to do. And then after university, I worked again. I did a bit of traveling and things like that. And it was suggested to me by friends and family, actually, over years. Well, you know, we could see you as a teacher, Tom. We think you'd be something you'd be really, really good at. And I hadn't really thought about it that much. But what I did was there's no way I wanted to teach secondary. That didn't interest me. So being a secondary history teacher wasn't for me. But primary did really interest me. In this presentation, this evening, I'm going to talk about primary and secondary. So this is not a primary exclusive. It's just my career has been in primary. I got some voluntary work experience in the primary schools that I went to, an infant school and a junior school that I went to as a child, and absolutely loved it. That then led me to getting a job as a teaching assistant in a Dudley primary school. At this point, I was about 23, something like that. And then I went on to do a PGCE, and that is a postgraduate certificate of education. So it's like a teaching qualification, if you like. And that led me to gaining something called QTS. All of this I'm going to talk about in my presentation. I might use a few little acronyms. I will try and explain what they mean as I go along. But if there's anything that doesn't make sense, just as Faye said, please just put questions in the chat. I might not know the answers to everything, but I obviously can share a certain amount of things with you and answer questions. Also, if there's any questions I don't know the answers to, I will go away and find out. And I will let the careers team at the college know, and they can share some answers to those questions retrospectively. And I'll also ask if these slides can be shared as well. I'm sure they will be. My current role, so I've worked in a few different primary schools in different roles: class teacher, middle leader, senior leader. I've been an assistant head and an acting deputy head for a year. And then the last 4 years, my 5th year actually, doing my current role, is I work for a local multi-academy trust called Stour Vale. But really a lot of my time is a seconded role with the University of Worcester, where I basically, in short, I work with secondary and primary PGCE trainees. And that is things like recruiting them to courses, supporting them on placement, coordinating and delivering training sessions, and also being a pastoral support for them as well. and we work with trainees across the Black Country predominantly. And this year we've got just under 60 trainees, and that's pretty much a 50-50 split between primary and secondary. Most of my time, for obvious reasons, is with the primary trainees, but I work with the secondary trainees and a couple of colleagues as well. And some of our secondary trainees train with us with Birmingham Newman University. So I work with a couple of local universities quite closely with teacher training. I often do this presentation face to face, but I will still get you to kind of reflect on this just for yourselves. Whether you're thinking about primary school, secondary school, your current college experience, it doesn't really matter. Can you just think about who your favorite teacher at school was and why? So just kind of reflect on that for yourself. And even if we've got any parents that have joined as well, you might want to kind of think about this. So just 30 seconds to yourself. Who was your favorite teacher at school and why? And it gives me an opportunity to have a sip of tea as well. Now, having done this kind of thing for a few years now and working with people thinking about training to be teachers and people who are training to be teachers and people who are former trainees and now working in the schools that we work with. And it's worth to say as well, I will add in, I work with schools across, not just Stour Vale Academy schools. I work with about 70 schools across the region. So this isn't an exclusive thing for the trust that I work with. But a common theme when we ask this kind of thing and get people to comment on this is generally people's favourite teachers are things like people who have developed a really good relationship with them, people who have inspired them, a love of a subject, or have really allowed people to realise their potential, or have introduced them to things for the first time, which has then sparked their curiosity. So some of you, your A-level choices have probably been influenced in some way by teachers who have taught you those subjects, as well as people that have made you feel really good about yourself or really good about your work or your learning, whether that's academically or in other ways as well. A talent for music, a talent for acting, for sport, whatever it might be. Someone who's been a real champion for you. And we remember our best teachers and we remember our worst teachers, and they tend to be really strong emotional connections. And it's a cliche, but you might not remember what people have said to you in the past and the kind of context it was in, but you'll always remember how people made you feel. And some of those feelings will be linked to teachers that taught you at school, good and bad. What I'm trying to get at, and I'm trying not to be too cheesy, but it's genuinely true, is teaching is a career where you can change people's lives and you can shape the future in a small way. You can have a really, really positive impact on people for the rest of their lives. And it's a challenging job and it's not an easy job. I'm not going to pretend that it's an easy role by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it is a really rewarding role like none other. So, why teaching? There's a few different things on here. Some of the things that I've kind of mentioned on the previous slide, but these are some of the things I've pulled together. Why, I think teaching is a fantastic career. It's had its ups and its downs. It's had its brilliant moments. It's had its challenging moments for me, but I can't imagine being involved in anything else. Job satisfaction, having, like I said, having that impact on people, being that champion for young children and young people and really inspiring them. And one of the things I find really rewarding, and I'm long enough in my career now where some of the children that I've taught at primary, I've always worked in local schools, so I will see people that I've taught now and again, hearing little stories of former pupils and what they've gone on to do, including current King Edge students I've bumped into, And I find it enormously satisfying to think that even in some small little way, I've helped them get to where they are and where they're going in terms of their passions and their career interests. Lots of job opportunities. Education in general is a massive employer, not just regionally, but nationally and internationally. There's lots and lots of job opportunities. I think if COVID and lockdown taught us anything in the education profession, despite modern technology and online, etc., we will always need teachers because ultimately the core of teaching. There's lots and lots of things around teaching, but it's about those human relationships. So, there's lots of job opportunities for people. If you're passionate about working with children and young people, if you're passionate about a particular subject, particularly at secondary, it can be a real privilege to share your passion for your subject every day for your job. A variety. I personally couldn't be in a job where I was doing the same thing every day. And there's an element of predictability about teaching. You have a classroom, you have a timetable, you're teaching the same subjects, etc. But no 2 days are ever the same. And you can teach the same lesson twice, and they can go very differently depending on the children that you have in front of you. So I couldn't be someone who was clock watching, doing the same thing, sat at a desk all day, every day. A variety, if that's important to you, it's certainly something you get in teaching. Lots of different career pathways, whether you want to spend your career in the classroom and become the very best teacher you can be. There's promotion and leadership roles in terms of subjects, leading different groups of teachers, phases of teachers, if you like, or a department at secondary. If you've got a passion for special educational needs, you could go down a SEN pathway and be somebody that supports children with special educational needs in school. Leadership pathways. It might be that you have after a few years you want to become a school leader, and you go on to what is called SLT, a senior leadership team, and an assistant head, deputy head, or a headship role. And you can have a real impact across multiple children by working with multiple teachers. And the way that my career has gone, I've had experience of school leadership, but I've gone down very much a teacher training route in recent years, which wouldn't have been something that appealed to me at the start of my career. There's an element that's the way my career has gone. But there's lots of opportunities that has brought for me for my own development and my own learning. You can work internationally. Generally speaking, a qualification from the UK is recognised across the world. I have friends and family members who have worked in international schools, the Middle East, the Far East, friends who have gone off to Canada and America to teach. And my wife, before I met her, she worked for 2 years. She's a secondary English teacher, and she worked for 2 years in Germany, and absolutely loved it. So these opportunities to kind of see the world through your job are there if that appeals to you. Be a lifelong learner. You never stop learning about teaching, about your subject, about various things. And as teachers, we should be some of the best learners going. Role modeling what we're doing. But I've been lucky enough to be involved in some brilliant training opportunities that have really developed me as a teacher and as a leader, if you like, throughout my career. And that very last one is to me what the moral purpose of teaching is, which is to make a positive difference in children's lives. And I don't think you can get that in just any career. A typical day. I generally think, this myth is kind of slowly getting dispelled in society, but it does crop up now and again. Some people do think that teaching is like a 9 till 3:30 job. You turn up at 9 o'clock, you teach a few lessons, you go home when the kids go home. It doesn't work like that. There are days where I will leave school fairly early, and I might leave school at, say, 3:45, 4 o'clock. Or I might get in a little bit later some days, depending on what's going on. But generally speaking, in my career, you can expect to be in school sort of 8 in the morning, to about 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the evening. And that might change day on day depending on what you've going on. But you would be in school significantly before the children arrive and after they go home. So it's not that 9 to half 3 job. Lots of similarities between primary and secondary, far more similarities than differences, but there are some kind of differences to the day. Obviously, in primary, you're in a year group, and generally speaking, you teach the same class of children all day, every day for a year. It might be that some children go to a different class for certain lessons, but generally speaking, you'll develop some really, really close, strong relationships with a group of children each year. You might move up with them or teach certain year groups. I taught a particular year group at my first school when they were in year 2, when they were in year 3, and when they were in year 6. And it was, looking back, it was probably some of the best years of my career because I knew those children and those families so well. And actually to see how those children developed throughout their time at primary school was a real privilege. And those children are about 22, 23 now. But again, like I said, it's really nice to think that I had an impact on them, hopefully had an impact on them. Secondary, the key thing there is you're obviously, I should say, obviously, primary, you teach a range of subjects. So, we have a breadth of subjects in the national curriculum, and you will, generally speaking, be teaching all of them. It might be some schools have a different teacher to come in and teach PE or music and things. But if you like that variety, then primary should really appeal. Secondary, it's more so about teaching the same subject that you're passionate about and multiple groups of children across a secondary school. It might be that you have your own classroom, but more often than not at secondary, teachers will move around the school and teach different classes. Okay. If you're in a core subject like English, you might see your groups every day or 4 times a week. Other subjects like RE, music, maybe languages, less so. So you would teach more classes, but less often in a week, if that makes sense. I've got some timetables I can show you in a bit. You're obviously teaching lessons, but you have to prepare lessons, you have to assess lessons. What some people might deem marking, but that is assessing lessons or giving children feedback. You might have training opportunities, staff meetings, parents' evenings. So not just, most of your time is spent teaching, obviously, but there's a lot more that goes on. And the way that I would say, teachers are often told they get long holidays, and that is true. And it's something that is a bonus, and it is attractive. The long holidays shouldn't be a reason to go into teaching, but they do exist, and certainly my wife and I are both teachers. It suits our lifestyle. Every summer we've got a whole 6 weeks off with our children. We go away for long holidays, and we don't take that for granted. But the offshot of that is you will be very busy in term time. So I would liken teaching to doing a full-time job from across a whole year, but condensed into 38, 39 weeks of term time. So you could be very, very busy during the terms, but then you have, 13 weeks of holiday in the year to kind of counteract that. So as a teacher, it is a busy job, but you do get these lovely long holidays as well. So this is just an example of a primary teacher's timetable. Generally speaking, I've worked in about four different primary schools, and every school will have it slightly differently. This is just an example, but you tend to have, you do registration in the morning and, kind of form group as such at secondary, but primary, you'd be with your class. And primary schools tend to teach English and maths in the morning. You'd have a break time, maybe an assembly at some point during that morning as well. And then in the afternoon, after lunch, you would teach some of the other, what we call foundation subjects and science. So core subjects are English, maths and science. and those subjects would be taught, generally speaking, in the afternoon. So that does look pretty busy, but teachers have what we call PPA time, and that is the equivalent of 10% of a teaching week. So it's like half a day where they are out of class, and they use that time to, PPA stands for planning, preparation and assessment, and you use that time to plan lessons and assess lessons and things. So you would have half a day a week where another teacher would come and cover your class. As a new teacher, and that's somebody, we call them ECTs, early career teachers, they have an additional 10% non-contact time to work on things for early career teachers, because they're new in their careers. So for your first 2 years of your career, you'd have the equivalent of a day where you're not in class teaching and you're doing other things, and someone would cover your class. And this, I apologise for the quality of the resolution on this image, but this is an example of a secondary timetable for a maths teacher, and I'll try and explain this best I can. You've obviously got the days of the week. It's running vertically. The numbers that you can see in the boxes refer to the year groups, and the little codings are like different class codes. So you can see that this teacher on a Monday, and this school day here is split up into 5 periods. So there's 5 lessons a day going on at this secondary school. And on a Monday, this teacher teaches year 11, then year 10, and later on in the afternoon, year 9 and year 8. And you'll see across the week, they'll see these groups multiple times because it's a core subject. The blank bits in there will be this teacher's PPA time, their non-contact time. And I think, again, this was a timetable for an ECT, so a teacher in their first 2 years of teaching. So period 3 on a Monday and period 3 on a Thursday, they get an extra bit of non-contact time where they're working on ECT things. But hopefully that gives you a little rough flavour of how your time would be spent in a typical teaching week for primary and secondary. And I've mentioned some of these things. I won't just read off the slides for you. Some of the things that the role involves in addition to teaching, just teaching lessons. So some of the things that I haven't mentioned, break duties. You might have a break duty once or twice a week. Extracurricular activities. And certainly the class teacher, I love to do football clubs, cricket clubs and things. So it might be after school, one night a week, sort of 3:30 to 4:30, you might do a club. Parents' evenings, but also spending time communicating with parents and carers. At primary, that's really easy, generally easy, because you will see parents at the door in the morning, drop-off time. Secondary, a little bit harder because you won't see the parents as often, but it could be things like emailing home, phone calls, passing on messages and things like that you need to. So, yeah, a lot more to it, a lot more to the role than just teaching lessons. This is worth sharing with you as well. I would never sort of say your main motivation for wanting to be a teacher is the money and the salary, but at the same time, that's important. So this gives you an idea of teachers' pay. These are the national pay scales. They aren't, we're in a world where a lot of schools are in multi-academy trusts now, and multi-academy trusts can set their own pay boundaries. But generally speaking, these are the pay ranges that most schools will follow in England. So on the left-hand side, what this means, M1 is the amount of money that a new teacher starts on in their first year. So this year, a teacher who's just qualified in their first job will earn £31,650 a year. If you live in London or near to London, that amount is a bit more. They have something called London weighting, but the rest of the country follows this pay scale. As a teacher, you would go up that pay range annually. So every year you go up 1 grade to M2, M3, M4. So, and then in your 6th year, currently people who are 6 years in are paid £43,607. And then you apply to go on to something called the upper pay range. And those are the ones that are called U1, U2, U3. And though you tend to go up those every 2 years. So in other words, a teacher who is 12 years into their career, with just classroom responsibilities, nothing additional, will be earning just under £50,000. So I don't think it's a badly paid career by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. There are additional payments which I've tried to show you on the right hand side, and they're called TLRs, teaching and learning responsibilities. And it tends to be there are bigger payments for secondary teachers, but primary teachers can earn these as well. And they will be payments for things like leading a subject. You might lead English in a primary school. You might be the PE coordinator, and that might bring a TLR payment with it. At secondary, you might be leading a subject, but obviously with a big department. So you might be head of science and paid quite a big TLR. Those tend to be what we call TLR 1s. And primary school teachers tend to get paid what we call TLR 2, so TLR payment 2, which is a bit less. And then if you have any SEND responsibilities, like as a Senko, you can get paid SEN allowances, and that is on top of your salary. And there is an additional pay range for leadership as well. If you go down, if you become an assistant head, deputy head, head teacher, there is another pay range beyond these as well. And just other little benefits of the job. I've mentioned this before: satisfaction and job opportunities, variety of the role. It's worth mentioning, and I'm revealing, probably letting you know my age here, because I never thought about this as a teacher at the start of my career. I've only started thinking about my pension in the last couple of years. A teacher's pension is still a pretty decent pension compared to other ones. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And there is a significant employer contribution. So you pay part of your salary into your pension pot. Your employer, so your school or your multi-academy trust, pays a proportion of that in as well. So there is a good pension for teachers. And I mentioned the holidays before as well. Okay, that is a benefit of the job. So you guys as college students will be thinking about looking for, if you're thinking about becoming a teacher, I'll talk a little bit later about school experience. I can't recommend that enough. If you're kind of 16, 17, 18. But if you decide, yes, this is what I want to do, you will be looking for something currently called ITT. And ITT stands for Initial Teacher Training. And there are lots and lots of different routes. So I'll try to explain them as simply and as clearly as I can. So as a rough overview for ITT, Initial Teacher Training, this is the path to obtaining something called QTS, Qualified Teacher Status. And you need that to be employed as a qualified teacher in England. So you do an ITT course to gain QTS. Okay. And you need to be qualified, educated to degree level. So you need an undergraduate degree. It's a graduate profession. So you need to go to get a degree at university. But there are some ways that you can become a teacher and gain a degree at the same time. So I'll explain that as well. So different routes are undergraduate routes. So this is, generally speaking, this will be people who are fresh out of college, 18, maybe if they've had like a few years out, maybe like sort of early 20s, but generally speaking, about 18, who go and do an undergraduate ITT course. Okay. And that is through a university. You can do some through local organisations called SCITs, but generally speaking, it's across the country, it's through universities. And most of those courses will be 3 years. And you gain graduate status and QTS at the same time. So you look out for courses that are Bachelors of Education, BEds, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, but they say that they come with QTS, because that means at the end of the course, you'll be a qualified teacher. That is the route for most, I'd say, sorry, about half of primary trainees do an undergraduate primary ITT course. There are undergraduate courses for secondary teachers, but not many. I think it's something that might grow in the years to come, where you develop your subject knowledge around your subject, whether it's maths, history, English, whatever that might be, and you can gain QTS. But undergraduate routes generally are for primary teachers. There are postgraduate routes, and this is what I did when I was a little bit older, about 23, 24, which is for somebody who's already got a degree. So this could be people who are straight out of university, so maybe 21, or people who are what we would call a career changer. So they've got a degree, but they've decided in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, that they want to train to be a teacher. And it's worth me mentioning that there's no set path into teaching. It's whatever is right for an individual. So most of the trainees I work with will be in their kind of mid-20s, but I will have people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are changing jobs. And this year I'm working with a secondary art trainee who is 63. Okay, and that's a record from in my experience, but it's someone who's always wanted to be a teacher and has decided at 63 to go for it. So it's something that's open to people throughout their lives, as long as they already have a degree. And they tend to be courses called a PGCE. The qualification is a postgraduate certificate in education, and that comes with QTS. And there are different routes. You can do them full-time, part-time, and there are some paid apprenticeship routes where you can work in a school and do your PGC at the same time. They're few and far between, but they are generally for people that are already working in a school and the school wants to keep them. And then you can have specialist pathways. So you can choose to be an early years specialist with primary, and that is, working in reception, nursery, and working generally like 3 to 7 or later years. Your course, you'd be qualified to teach the entire primary range, or you might do a subject specialism like primary with PE or primary with maths, would be a course that you might be able to do that would come with QTS. And secondary, most secondary teachers will have done a PGCE because they will have gone away to uni and done a degree in the subject that they want to teach. And then they will go and do a biology PGCE or a geography PGCE or whatever it is they're passionate about. So essentially, essential requirements for applying. If you want to apply to an undergraduate route, on average, you need about 104 UCAS points. I work very closely with the University of Worcester. To get on their undergraduate primary course, you need 112. But the England average is about 104 UCAS points. In terms of A-level grades, I don't know what that equates to, and the careers team might be able to elaborate on that a little bit more. For a postgraduate, you need a degree. And generally speaking, you need one that's a 2-2 or above. And you need GCSEs in English and maths for secondary, at least a 4, or English, maths and science for primary. And the last one here, which is assessed on interview for an ITT course, you need to have a good standard of written and verbal English. And that would be assessed through your application and your interview. Now, these are things that you don't have to apply. This slide was things that you have to apply for an ITT course. These are the things that I would say are highly desirable and the things worth you thinking about if this is a career path that you want to go down. Hopefully that goes without saying. Passionate about wanting to work with children and young people. Passionate about education, and learning and whatever your subject might be, particularly at secondary. An understanding of what we mean by professionalism. Teachers are role models. Children will look up to you and we need to behave in certain ways. The way we present ourselves, the language that we use, how we represent the schools we work for and the profession in general. And teachers should be seen, and I think generally speaking are seen as upstanding members of the you know, the school community and the local community. So understand what it means to be a professional, and that might be something new to your age because you guys are young. You know, you got time to kind of learn about these kind of things in the workplace. And I can't recommend this enough: getting some experience of working with children in a school. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. And here are some other things, and I won't just read off the slides for you. I'll let you just kind of digest this because I need another sip of tea. Some of the skills and knowledge that would be useful and are really helpful if you're thinking of a career in teaching. Emotional intelligence is important. Being able to relate to others and read their emotions and being able to control your emotions. And I'm not saying I've always been great at that, but it's something that I have learned with time and got really better at as a teacher. Really important. So this is my advice to you guys, whether you're year 12 or year 13. If you're considering a career in teaching, think about your degree choice, your university choices. If you are aspiring to be a secondary English teacher, you know, going on to do an English related degree is pretty essential or related. So like journalism, we sometimes get people who have done a law degree come and train to teach English. But clearly doing something related to the subject that you want to teach is really important. At primary, you know, if you decide right now, I definitely want to be a primary school teacher, I would look to do an undergraduate primary teaching degree. Okay, that I mentioned, an undergraduate route. If you decide that this might be for me, but I want to do something else, for primary, it doesn't really matter what your degree is in, as long as you get at least a 2-2, because you can then go on to do a postgraduate route. And I would recommend getting some school experience, whether it's half a day in a school or, you know, secondary, primary, just to see what it is like from a teacher's point of view. And it might be for some of you, you go and work in a school after A levels or after university. And that's what I did. That was just what was right for me. So the careers team will add a little bit more information about this. So I'm not going to talk very long. But the last sort of 2-3 years, what I've done and Stour Vale, as in the people I work for, is we have helped to arrange school work experience for the college students. So we've done, I think, roughly about 30 students a year, something like that over the last few years. The careers team will talk about this a little bit more, but we're happy to help. And like I said, we work with a real range of schools across the Black Country, and we've set up people with opportunities to visit a primary or a secondary, and then arrange to do more work experience from there to fit around their college studies. It looks really good on a UCAS application. Whether you are applying to do a teacher training degree or not, it shows that you've been in the workplace, that you've done something voluntarily that's beneficial. Even if you do some school work experience, let's say you do half a day and you decide teaching is definitely not for me, that is a successful outcome. Okay, but you will not know unless you get into a school and see what it's like and ask questions of teachers. Okay, it might be you get into school and absolutely love it and then want to go back and do more. But some of the things that we have done is we've been able to come into the college and help process some DBS checks. And that is basically a check that makes it easier for people to get into schools. And I'll leave that for the careers team to talk to you about. Very quickly, I'm almost done. I'll share these slides. This is a link to a government website where you can find out more information about a career in teaching. This video, I'm not going to play now just because of time. But what I might do is when I email the slides to the careers team, is just put the little link in the email. This is a video about the impact, I think, of being a good teacher on someone's lives. But just because of time, I realise we're at 22. and I want to give people some opportunities for questions. I won't play this now. And that leads me to the end of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and I'll have a look in the chat. I haven't seen any questions come through, but Faye, I will pass over to you if that's okay.
Yes, of course, that's great. Thank you so much, Tom. That was really, really helpful, so informative, and hopefully our students have really picked up lots of really important information about sort of the career of a teacher, the differences between some of those training pathways, especially because in certainly the last few years, I think it has really started to open up. There have been other options available. You mentioned the apprenticeship route, the sort of skip routes and those types of things. So there are certainly other routes available for students now, and it can be sometimes a bit of a minefield when there's more available. It can be difficult to kind of figure out the right way for you, can't it? Students, please do put any questions that you have in the chat. Already answered one about being a Senko. We've just had one from George. Do you think that there will be some opportunities to do degree apprenticeships in teaching as soon as we leave college? And that does echo something that had also been asked previously about doing a degree apprenticeship. And I think you have mentioned there that really, I think the degree apprenticeship, and correct me if I'm wrong, was designed primarily to allow for a route into teaching for those people that perhaps are already working in a school but aren't graduates. Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. It's the degree apprenticeship is, to the best of my knowledge, is being trialed in shorted subjects like maths at secondary. I think you've hit the nail on the head where it's going to be, well, it's kind of a watch this space because we've got a new government, etc., etc. So, but I think it's going to be more for people who have been working in schools for a number of years but don't have a degree. So it's a way, there's an employment rate for people who are already experienced. Can I answer a couple of questions that I can see in the chat,
Yes,
Craig?
please
I
do.
couldn't see
Yes,
them
yeah,
before.
absolutely, yeah.
So someone asked about wants to work within psychology and with children. So Faye, your answer is spot on right in terms of Senko. The other thing I would say is I know of people who aspire to be an educational psychologist. So I would my understanding there is you would need to do a degree in psychology, but also have experience of being a teacher. Generally, that to be an educational psychologist, having those two things is really important. I know of people who have done a psychology degree and then a PGCE, have taught for a couple of years and then got a what we call an ed psych role, educational psychologist. I also know of people who have been a teacher for years and years and years who don't have a degree in psychology, but have then done a master's conversion course for a year, and then then become an ed psych. So that's worth you thinking about if that's something
Yeah.
that you want to
Couple of
do.
routes. Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tom. That's so helpful. There's one in there about being a primary and a secondary school teacher. Is a way that you can
Okay.
train to be both.
Well, this is the thing that's probably really, really confusing, but I will try and do this. The salient point with teaching is you don't actually need to have the primary and the secondary part of it. It's the QTS bit. So if you have QTS, in theory, you can work as a primary school teacher, you can work as a secondary school teacher. The reality is, my background is in primary. A secondary school is highly unlikely to employ me as a secondary physics teacher. Okay, but legally and in terms of employment, I could be because I hold QTS. So there isn't a course as such where you train to be primary and secondary, but I know of people who are experienced primary teachers who have moved over into secondary, and I know people who are experienced secondary teachers who have moved over to primary later on in their career. The salient point I would say is if you want to be a secondary school teacher, that you do a degree that's related to that subject because you need the subject knowledge. And you might end up in a school with a sixth form. So you need to teach, you might be teaching A level, and generally you need to be qualified a level above the level that you're teaching. So to teach A level, you'd need the degree. So that just the only thing might be worth you're thinking about?
Perfect. There was a question about primary school experience. If you can't find any, would it be useful if you were thinking about, so would doing primary experience help if you are thinking about doing secondary education? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, I think what we've done with some of the students in the past who have been interested in school experience is we've asked if you would prefer primary or secondary, and we've set people with that up with that initially.
Mm.
It could be if you're in year 12 that you maybe think about one or the other this year, and then one or the other next year. Because
Mhm.
you might get into a primary school and think, oh gosh, no, I can't teach the littlies, or you might
Mhm.
love it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Um, I generally think we're doing primary experience. Yeah, I think any school experience would be great, but I think as long as you persevere, we can help. You should be able to find some primary or some secondary experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And just as we're talking about the school work experience program, it is something that we offer through with yourselves. And so what we will be doing is we'll be sending out a form via the teaching pathway. So if any students are on here and they aren't part of the career pathway for teaching, they do need to sign up. We'll put a link on so that you've got that afterwards. And there will be a form requesting you to complete that to say that you want work experience in a school. And exactly as Thomas just said, we'll ask you to identify whether you're looking at primary or secondary, and we'll do our very best. Tom helps with that enormously, helping to place students into schools that are going to be appropriate for them. So if it's secondary, identifying what subject that you're interested in and those types of things. So that will be going out sort of towards the end of this year. So in December or maybe January, it'll be Jane who'll be organising all of that information, and she's online as well. So she might be able to answer any other questions in the chat if you do have any. But please do sign up for that. It's so important. As Tom mentioned, we can get the DBSs sorted out for you. But sort of, we only get one opportunity for this a year. So please do make sure that you sign up if you're interested. Um, Another question on here is, does a secondary PGC also enable you to teach A level? And I think you already mentioned about the different levels, didn't you, Tom, to be honest with you?
Yeah, it does is the answer. You'll
Mm.
see that the secondary PGC courses that we run, and this is this is the same for all as far as I'm aware, is they might be advertised as 11 to 16. So most of your teaching experience will be Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, but they will come with what they call post 16 enhancement. So you will get a little bit that you might visit a college, or if the schools that you're placed in for your teacher training have a sixth form, you might get an opportunity to pick up some A-level teaching. But the short answer is yes. Secondary PGC, you can be qualified to teach A-level.
Lovely. That's so great. There was a question that was put on prior to today's session, and I think we've already kind of discussed this, but one question was what kind of skills and personality traits needed for secondary teaching and how to know if it's the right career choice for you. And I think you've kind of already gone over that. It's all this, it's work experience, it's everything. But is there a way that you can sort of sum that up, do you think, Tom?
I would say for secondary, a passion for subject. Absolutely, because you're picking if you're going into a core subject, you'll be teaching your subject all day, every day. So if you're
Mm.
passionate about English, sorry, you want to be an English teacher, you need to be passionate about English. Um, Science, there will be you can do a biology PGCE, chemistry PGCE, physics PGCE, but as a science teacher at secondary, you can expect to teach all three. And the reality is, if your specialism is chemistry, you will probably teach key stage 3 and 4 chemistry, but key stage 3 biology and physics. So you need to think about that as well, and particularly with your A level choices. Um, Patience and empathy, really good personality, traits for all teachers. Being able to relate to people. You can have all the subject knowledge in the world, but if you can't develop relationships or struggle with that, it can be hard. So those are things that come to mind first of all. For you guys, your age, where you are, that school experience is essential. Because unless you get into schools and feel what it's like and see what it's like, you're never really going to know. And I will work with people that they'll apply to do a PGCE with minimal experience, and they're few and far between. But every year I'll have someone on a primary PGCE who goes, "This isn't for me," and I wish I'd applied to do secondary, and vice versa. And generally, these will be people that haven't done any or very little
Yeah.
work experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's so key, isn't it? Just a couple more just to touch on. Somebody's asked, and I think this just to help. I think you've already clarified it a little bit, but somebody's asking about, is there a way you can train, to do a PGCE in two different subjects? And I think it's just clarifying that the PGCE isn't the subject specialism in that sense. So perhaps just to just touch on that a little bit more, just to clarify that, that would be great.
Yeah, the PGCE is like the academic award, if you like, and it's at master's level, and it comes with what they call master's credits. So 60 master's credits, and that means you're a third the way to doing completing a master's. The subject that's related to this, you'll see a maths PGCE or a history PGCE, is because that is what you will be assessed on teaching wise. Okay, so they'll come and watch you teaching that subject, and you will be in a university or a tutor group of other trainees in that subject. So you will have what you call sessions on pedagogy, and pedagogy is teaching children, but the pedagogy of teaching maths or the pedagogy of teaching PE, yeah, whatever relates to your subject. Just because you've done a PGC in one subject doesn't mean you can't then teach other subjects. I'm not aware of any PGCEs where you can do, I don't know, English and PE. Okay, it tends to be one subject. If you are teaching science, you can expect to teach all three kind of disciplines as such. If you're teaching a subject like RE, you can probably expect to pick up some history teaching on a timetable or other kind of humanities related things. So it might be that, just to fill your timetable. So your teaching timetable as a trainee or even as a qualified teacher wouldn't be purely in that subject. The salient point I keep coming back to is the QTS. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much. I think pretty much we've covered everything. There was one question about how hard it is to find jobs in teaching. And would you say that's sort of dependent on your subject specialism, especially for secondary?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, as a country, and there are a lot of training bursaries. I haven't even mentioned this at postgraduate level. You get paid a bursary for some subjects. So people that are training to teach, for instance, off the top of my head, maths, they can get paid about £29,000 tax free while they do their PGCE.
Yeah.
Other subjects don't have one, and they tend to relate to where we struggle to recruit teachers. So they'd be STEM subjects, so science, maths, technology, languages, computing. But generally speaking, there's lots of job opportunities out there. Some subjects are a little bit more competitive. PE, as a country, we don't struggle to recruit PE trainees, so PE is quite competitive. Pardon the no pun intended. And then yeah, it tends to be linked to subject really. And then primary, there are more primary schools around in general. I mean, it comes down to things like how far you're prepared to travel, things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think that pretty much wraps up most of the questions, unless there's any more that are going to be put into the chat, which I haven't seen any others. So I think we've pretty much covered everything, and we're on time, which is fantastic as well. So thank you, Tom. I think that has been so helpful for us and for our students. And I hope that everybody at home has found that really, really useful tonight. We appreciate your time so much, Tom. So thank you, as always, for helping us along with these things. It's really, really appreciated by us all. So thank you. We will stop the recording in just a moment. We'll circulate that. afterwards to our students, along with your slides, the link for the video, and any other links that we've put into the chat today as well. So I think that's everything. So thank you, Tom. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you for attending, everybody, and best of luck with your studies and things like that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.